Welcome to Fast Track Gains. I'm here to help you accelerate your gains. This is the fourth episode of my ninth series, Training Plateaus. If you have broken the very first 3-month burnout plateau, the second beginner plateau, and the third intermediate plateau, then congratulations, now you are a late intermediate and will have an athletic body that is balanced between muscularity, aesthetics, and performance. At this point, you can choose to stop your muscle growth journey, and there will be many benefits for you to do so. But should you choose to grow even more muscle, then you would have to break the hardest plateau out of all the plateaus, the generic ceiling height plateau. If you have watched some of my previous content, you should be very familiar with the term generic ceiling height. This is a term that I coined myself since the inception of this channel. And this is the link of all my previous videos that have addressed the critical importance of the generic ceiling height in one way or another. There may be some individual variants, but the generic ceiling height is most likely going to occur somewhere around fat free mass index 23 for most people, which is right at the tipping point where you can proudly claim yourself to be a true advanced hypertrophy trainee. And to some extent, you can even say the whole purpose of my channel is to help people break their own generic ceiling height. Now, why is this plateau the hardest plateau to break? Well, as I said in episode 1, in order to fully understand the unique challenges of each plateau, it is important to revert back and look at each plateau from your backland perspective instead from an omnipresent perspective. So what is the perspective before you hit this plateau? You just broke your intermediate plateau, which is the longest plateau, and you have accumulated a lot of experience through trial and error. And there are a lot of tricks up your sleeves like bulking, switching exercises, increasing training volume, increasing cardiovascular fitness that you have learned along the way. Naturally, you will think that there is no other plateau you cannot break with all the things you have learned. And it just happens to be the generic ceiling height is the plateau that will completely shatter a late intermediate's cockiness. And even from a retrospective or omnipresent perspective, the generic ceiling height is still the hardest plateau to break in my opinion. As to why this plateau will exist and remain as the ceiling height to even the most serious hardcore lifters, there are two reasons to account for this. Number one, lack of enough information, or more specifically, science. Almost all the mainstream natural fitness channels like Athlean-X, Scott Herman, Jeff Nippert, their host fat free mass index are all below the generic ceiling height, hence the name generic ceiling height. If they have not broken the generic ceiling height themselves, then naturally they cannot teach you how to break it. And ironically, one common denominator behind all these channels is that they're all very science-based. That's why I said it in my very first video, mainstream training channels can only help you reach a certain ceiling height, and the science can only guide you to a certain ceiling height.
Science and traditional weight training knowledge can only help you become very good. To become truly impressive, you will need an entirely unique set of training philosophies yourself. Now, what I mean by that? Well, the mainstream training channels, they can only help you reach a certain ceiling height. And as well, science can only guide you to a certain ceiling height.
And it is not just the science-based training information that is extremely scarce. The available nutritional information for achieving an FFMI higher than 23 is even less. This could be a more important part to explain why so many people's fat free mass index top at the generic ceiling height. And as this is a very exclusive and opaque area, oftentimes you have to resort to the enhanced world to look for some nutrition ideas. This is the practical reason why generic ceiling height exists, because the information on how to break this ceiling is so limited. Number two, extra muscle mass above the generic ceiling height is not as nature intended. This is the biological reason why generic ceiling height exists, and here I'm going to play a clip from my previous video, Bulking Episode 2, Why You Should Bulk, to explain this point. One thing I forgot to mention in my previous generic ceiling height videos is extra amount of muscle mass above FFMI23 is artificial. And when I say artificial, I don't mean use of PEDs, but rather any muscle mass above fat-free mass index 23 is generally not functional beneficial. When adding extra muscle mass to your frame does serve a purpose like making it faster, stronger, or more agile, then from evolution perspective, even muscle tissues are very metabolically expensive. There's a strong reason for making it happen because extra muscle mass does serve a purpose. But when adding extra muscle mass serves little functional purpose, which is the case for fat-free mass index over 23, then from evolution perspective, there's little incentive for the body to do that, because more muscle tissue will not only bring no functional benefit to the body, but also bring the liability of costing the body more calories. That's why I say bodybuilding above a certain muscularity is artificial. You have to simulate an artificial environment to convince the body that it can afford extra muscle mass, even if it does not serve any functional purpose, because energy supply is abundant. And to use myself as an example to prove this point, I currently weigh over 91 kilos at 170 centimeters. My fat-free mass index is edging 26, which is way over 23. Yet, I'm definitely much slower than when I was at 78 kilos. My cardiovascular fitness might be still high, still riding over 1,000 calories per hour on my ellipticals. But one thing for sure is that I definitely do not want to run. My absolute strength may have increased a little bit, but my relative strength has decreased significantly. When I was 78 kilos, I could bang out more than 15 strict bodyweight pull-ups in a row. But now, I don't even want to do any bodyweight pull-ups. And all my joints, whether it is the shoulder joint, elbow joint, hip joint, or the knee joint, they may not be vulnerable, but they all have very restricted mobility because of all the extra muscle mass packed around them. Heck, even cutting the toenails or bending over to pick up some paper on the ground or scratching my whole back is increasingly becoming a chore for me. And I'm using less and less free weight compound exercises in my training. In a nutshell, I'm way less athletic and functional than when my fat-free mass index was 23. And besides looking jacked and cool, I don't gain substantial functional benefits from my extra muscle mass. Quite the contrary, there are a lot of downsides. As the extra muscle mass above the generic ceiling height is a net negative, not a net positive from an evolution perspective. That's why this plateau is the hardest plateau to break, because you are basically going against your own biology. And why I said at the beginning of this video, you can choose to stop your muscle growth at the generic ceiling height, and there will be many benefits for you to do so. However, there is one glaring downside if you don't break the generic ceiling height. A mainstream generic ceiling height physique, while very impressive when you have a pump and take your shirt off, is still quite invisible when you are in a shirt and just walking around. This could be a very hard pill to swallow for many folks, given the fact that they have put in so much effort into it and are still not receiving the recognition they deserve. So, for those who do not want to swallow the hard pill and decide to look absolutely jacked even in clothing, there are a few things you have not done before that you have to do now in order to break this plateau. Number 1, strategic explosive bulking. I first described this kind of bulking in detail in my previous video, Hacking into the Ultimate Hypertrophy Code, Advanced Part 1, and later coined this term in another video, Bulking Episode 1, What is Bulking? And nicknamed this kind of bulking as the sledgehammer policy. On rare occasions, you have to throw in thousands of extra calories during your normal long-term sustainable bulk in order to break the sticky point. And most likely, you will have to resort to this sledgehammer policy when you try to break the generic ceiling height. This kind of bulking will never exist in any textbook and will never be backed up by any science. You can only experience it yourself to believe what I say here. Outside of this context, I would not recommend this kind of bulking to anyone. But if you want to break your generic ceiling height, this may be the most important thing that you have to do. Number 2, change from strength-driven mindset to muscular endurance-driven mindset. Getting stronger to get bigger may be very effective previously, but it will not be so effective when your fat-free mass index is approaching 23. Instead, doing more reps will be much more effective to get you bigger. I've already mentioned this point in another previous video, 10 Fitness Commandments, 9 Elements. And here, I'm going to play a clip from this video to explain the reason why.
The relative importance of strength on hypertrophy will gradually decrease as you progress and give way to other factors. And that is something important that many people need to realize if their goal is to get jacked instead of being super strong. These two are different adaptations. Muscular endurance. This element may not be as impressive as strength, but it may contribute no less to hypertrophy than strength. The traditional hypertrophy range, 8 to 12 or even 15 reps, already has a light overlap with muscular endurance. And there's always a seat for sets of more than 20 reps in hypertrophy training, which falls under muscular endurance. And if you push this element to extreme, you have calisthenics athletes that bang out reps after reps only with their body weight, and some of them are really muscular. In fact, I would even argue that the more advanced you are in hypertrophy, the more important muscular endurance will become, because higher reps are a more efficient way to drive up volume than higher strength. And the tipping point where muscular endurance overtakes strength in terms of contribution to hypertrophy is probably somewhere close to the generic ceiling height. So, if you're somebody that plateaus at the generic ceiling height, changing from strength-driven mindset to muscular endurance-driven mindset may very well help you break the plateau.
Number 3, stop being obsessed with hardcore, old-school free weights. This point is a natural extension from the last point, as real strength is only defined by the amount of free weights you can lift. Up until you hit the generic ceiling height, free weight exercises should constitute the majority of your training program, and there are many benefits for you to do so. However, when your fat-free mass index is approaching 23, the downsides of free weights will also be very pronounced. You don't want to get injured by lifting heavy free weights. You don't want to accumulate too much fatigue by lifting heavy free weights. You don't want to decrease your training volume by lifting heavy free weights. All these concerns are good reason for you to decrease the percentage of a heavy free weight compounds and increase the percentage of cables and machine exercises. Number 4, prioritize your lower body training and increase your lower body training volume. This is another natural extension from point number 2 and number 3, but it is worth mentioning it by itself. Low reps, heavyweight barbell back squat, and the deadlift done once every week may work very well for beginners and intermediates, and are the signature of one's true strength. But for you to break the generic ceiling height, that is not enough training volume. You probably have to check out your ego, drop the weight, and switch your leg training to a more medium weight 12 to 15 rep style training, because most people's leg muscles just respond better to medium to higher reps. Machine hack squat, machine hip thrust, and barbell Romanian deadlift are my recommendations, because you can push yourself safely on these exercises with medium weight and accumulate enough training volume. And depending on the speed of your own recovery, you may also want to increase your lower body training frequency from once a week to maybe once every 4 to 5 days. As more than half of your total muscle mass is located at your lower body. Leg training has to become the priority concern of your training. And this, along with the first point, explosive strategic bulking, will be the two key weapons to help you break the hardest plateau. Let's say, guys, the fourth plateau you have to face on your journey, the generic ceiling height plateau. You don't have to break this plateau, but if you do decide to break it, understand that your body will challenge you the hardest this time. Please like this video and subscribe my channel. In the next episode, I will talk about the last plateau, which is the most helpless plateau. Stay tuned. Thank you for your support, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.